and Isaac Hayes have passed away. I didn't think this day would ever come. I was also in denial on Kurt Cobain, Heath Ledger, Gerald, and Sean Levert. But when a funny man dies, it's even sadder because the comedian eases our pain by creating out of thin air the greatest form of medicine, laughter. Oceans 11, 12, 13, Mr. 3000, and The Bernie Mac Show, the Mac Man, we miss you, and we remember you tonight on Garrard McClendon Live. Thank you for joining Garrard McClendon Live. I will miss Bernie Mac. Just the look on his face would make me laugh. And when he told the joke, he looked you right in the eye, just knowing that the punchline was going to evoke an explosion of laughter. What were your favorite Bernie Mac moments? Later, comedian Mike Alexander will be on the show to share his Bernie Mac stories. But the executive director of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research in Chicago, Debbie Durer, joins us from Studio C. Welcome, Debbie. Thank you for joining Garrard McClendon Live.
Thank you for having me.
You know, Debbie, let's get right into this. We understand that Bernie Mac, he didn't necessarily die of sarcoidosis. He died of complications due to pneumonia. But, you know, what is basically the cause of sarcoidosis? And before we even get to that, could you define it for us?
Sure. Sarcoidosis, it's an inflammatory disease that can affect any organ in the body. And in people with sarcoidosis, their immune system overreacts, and that overreaction causes damage to different organs.
Now, Debbie, are you born with it, or does it develop over time? What happens here?
Well, we don't know exactly what causes sarcoidosis. I think the best information that we can share at this point is that someone has a genetic predisposition to the disease and then comes in contact with some form of trigger in the environment that might not trigger the disease in someone like myself, but might, in the case of someone with the genetic predisposition, they would end up with sarcoidosis.
We're taking phone calls at 630-575-TALK, 630-575-TALK. We have the executive director for the Sarcoidosis Foundation in Chicago. You know, getting right to the matter of the similarities, Debbie, with sarcoidosis, and I'm looking at sickle cell anemia and possibly the third one, lupus. Are there similarities and major differences here?
Well, I'm not a health professional, so we would encourage people that have questions specifically about different medical conditions to probably talk to them with their doctor. I think the best information we can share is that if you're experiencing symptoms that seem out of the ordinary for you, it's important to discuss them always with your doctor. I think some things that are fairly common with sarcoidosis tend to be organ specific. If you notice you're having difficulty breathing, a persistent cough, that sort of thing, then certainly that can be a sign. But there are more general symptoms that plague patients with the disease. You know, just a general feeling of ill health, chronic fatigue, weight loss are things that you could watch for too, but are indicative of other problems also. Yeah,
you know, I've got a close family member that has sarcoidosis, and it's frustrating, you know, to see this individual go through the pain. Let's talk about the relationship that Bernie Mac had with your foundation.
Well, Bernie Mac had been involved with the NBA CARES program, which is a program organized by the National Basketball Association. Bill Russell and his family is involved with that charity as well, and they did what was called a fantasy basketball league every year, and Bernie Mac had donated the winnings through that charity event to this foundation, and as a result we were able to help thousands of patients. So although, you know, today we may not be able to say for certain what role sarcoidosis played in his death, it's certainly clear that he was committed to helping others with sarcoidosis.
Yeah, and you know, it's a beautiful thing because I believe, Debbie, that's what celebrity is for. You know, it's not to just parade around and be the famous person in the room or on TV. It's about using that power to help a cause. I'm going to take a phone call. Charlie, thank you for calling Garrard McClendon Live. What's your comment or question? Charlie, you're on Garrard McClendon Live. Charlie? Okay, Debbie, we're going to come back to you. Debbie, how long has your foundation been in existence?
The Foundation for Sarcoidosis research was started in 2000, so we're coming up on 8 years now that we've been here in Chicago providing support to patients. And the organization was started by a group of patients who were very interested in putting as much money as they could towards the cause of research to unlock some of the questions that we decided we didn't have answers to, or at least not sufficient answers. What causes the disease? What can be done about it? What treatments are available? And so I think we've funded some really innovative research projects in the last few years.
Thank you so much. You know what, Debbie, give us your website address, please, for our viewers.
Sure, it's www.stopsarcoidosis.org. And we also have a toll-free number, but certainly people in Chicago could call us locally. But toll-free, 866-358-5477. And anyone who contacts us is certainly free to get all kinds of information and access to support.
Now, before we go to break, Debbie, will you be having fundraisers, this winter or next summer?
Well, we actually do a great program along the lakefront on September 21st. We partner with a bunch of other lung health organizations, and it's called the Hike for Lung Health. It will be held at Montrose Harbor. It's a great opportunity to come out, to meet some other patients that have sarcoidosis, and to raise awareness and funds for lung research. So that's a great one. And we do an event every February called KISS Chicago. It's Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. I think both of those are great opportunities to help raise awareness, raise important money for research, and interact with other people who have the disease.
Debbie, please stay with us.
Okay.
Debbie DeRay is from the Foundations for Sarcoidosis Research. We want you to stay with us. We're going to be back in 2 minutes on GML. If you've got any questions, 630-575-TALK. We'll answer those questions pertaining to sarcoidosis. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
I ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
I was born here. I'm going to pass here.
Yeah.
I like Chicago because Chicago helps me stay right here.
That's the Mac Man, Bernie Mac, sharing his feelings about Sweet Home Chicago to WGN's Dean Richards. Welcome back to Garrard McClendon Live. In our Tribune Tower, we've got comedian Mike Alexander joining us, along, of course, in Studio C at CLTV. We've got Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, Debbie DeRay. Mike Alexander, thanks for joining the show.
No problem, Gerard.
Fellow comedian and friend and acquaintance of Bernie Mac. It's a sad day, my brother. Talk to us about that.
Well, yeah, it's a sad day for Chicago. It's a sad day for comedy in general. Bernie Mac meant a lot to this city, and he also meant a lot to the comedians, especially the young comedians who perform around here. Bernie was an original. You can't pigeonhole the style of comedy that he had. He was like no other comedian, and his dedication towards this art form that we do was unparalleled.
Yeah, now, Mike, I'm going to take a phone call. Debbie, hold on. I've got R. Smith. R. Smith, thank you for joining Garrard McClendon Live. What's your question or comment?
Yes, hi. I would like to know if this is sarcoidosis is hereditary.
That's a good question. Debbie, is it hereditary?
Well, I think from the research that's been done, that you see the disease will occur in siblings and in parents and children, so that certainly points to there being a genetic component to the disease. So I think the answer there is yes.
Yes, there may be a trait. I'm going to take John. John, thank you for calling Garrard McClendon Live. What's your question or comment?
Debbie, my wife was diagnosed with this disease, and we need to know what type of questions to ask our doctor. And we also wanted to know what type of research is being done to help patients who have the disease.
Thank you for calling, John. Appreciate that. Debbie, questions?
Well, I think those are great questions. In terms of the kinds of research that's being done right now, I think that the things that patients are looking for is what kinds of treatments are available, what kind of cures are perhaps on the horizon. And the foundation, if you do visit our website, there's a pretty comprehensive list of grants that we've given out. Some of them are looking at new kinds of treatments that are available for sarcoidosis patients, and certainly different kinds of research that would explain the questions of, how did I get the disease in the first place, whether it's looking at the genetics, which was the previous caller's question, or certainly, were there an environmental trigger that we could pinpoint, or even why do does the inflammatory process happen the way it does.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
terms of questions that you'd ask your physician, I think anytime you have a new symptom, whether it's sarcoidosis or anything else, I think you know how you're feeling, and if something seems out of the ordinary, those are certainly things you always want to bring to your doctor's attention.
Yes, and as Debbie mentioned, it's an inflammatory disease that I was also reading on your website that it attacks mostly the lungs and the lymph nodes. I want to lighten things up just a little bit. I know this is a very serious topic, but I do have Mike Alexander, the comedian. Mike, talk to me, man. 2 questions about work ethic. What does it take to be a comedian? And then I know you got a funny Bernie Mac story. Talk to me.
Well, I'm not sure if I have necessarily a funny story. I won't make anything up. But, you know, the work ethic to be a great comedian means that you have to breathe, you have to eat, and you have to sleep this business. This business is highly competitive. There's a lot of people who want everyone else's spot. And quite frankly, you know, the business, how it stands right now, there are hardly any clubs left. When Bernie started, when I started, it was a heyday of comedy, and you know, and there were plenty of clubs around, and even then it was very competitive. But nowadays, if you really are serious about this, then you need to approach it like it's a job, and you need to be very diligent.
Yes, that's the key. And you know, if anyone out there has any affinities for Bernie Mac, I mean, if you've got a funny story, if there's a favorite program or movie, you know, a favorite stand-up that you saw, call me. 630-575-TALK is the number, 630-575-TALK. We've got Mike Alexander in the mix, also Debbie DeRay from the Foundation of Sarcoidosis Research. It's Garrard McClendon Live you're watching, and still to come on today's show, we're going to talk about Funny Man, Bernie Mac. We're going to also try to get to Isaac Hayes later in the show, but we'll be back in 2 minutes. Garrard McClendon Live.
The same woman for a long time. He was a great family guy. He had his daughters he was proud of. He put all his kids in college, man. This is a good brother, man. People remember him for his jokes and stuff, but the real dude, the real guy, Bernie Mac, was a solid brother, man.
Man, that's Steve Harvey in his own words. Bernie Mac's co-star on the critically acclaimed Kings of Comedy, and also his good friend. Welcome back to Garrard McClendon Live. 630-575-TALK is the number, 630-575-TALK. We're with Michael Alexander and Debbie DeRay. Michael, quickly, man, you know, something I wrote on my blog earlier today is that Bernie Mac was so good at the setup of the joke, the story, and the punchline. Very Bill Cosby-like, how you get the joke to marinate with jabs, and then you have these haymakers, man. I mean, how difficult is it to write jokes like that?
It's very difficult to write jokes like that. I mean, you know, for one, Bernie Mac wasn't a safe comedian. Bernie Mac took a lot of chances, and Bernie Mac was very edgy. And, you know, when you do that, you know, you're not going to please all of the people all of the time. But I tell you, he was a comedian's comedian, and he was well respected because he didn't take the easy way out, and he wrote very thought-provoking material and very, you know, things that people related to.
Yes, and you know, Mike, I was on your website earlier, man. I was watching some of the jokes. You're pretty edgy, too, man. I was checking you out, and I do want to give you your props. You work with George Lopez. You've written for Jay Leno. You've written for Arsenio Hall. So I do want to give you kudos on that, and I appreciate you coming on to the show. I'm going back to the phones.
Thank you.
Talking to Lanice, Garrard McClendon Live. Lanice, welcome to the show. What's your question or comment?
No, my best episode of Bernie Mac when he was in Players Club.
You like that?
Yep. You don't have any clips for that?
Oh man, you got to check those out at your nearest video store. But I appreciate you calling Garrard McClendon Live. You know, that's what it's all about. It's about being a fan. And you know, I want to read this from the Chicago Tribune about Bernie Mac. Bert Haas, who is the executive vice president of Zanies in Chicago, said, "I think what Bernie Mac did that few, if any, have been able to do was become a success here in Chicago." He goes on to say, most of our homegrown talent has to leave. They have to go to LA or New York to become famous. But he says Bernie Mac was selling out the Chicago theater before he went to New York City. I mean, that's truly a testament to the talent of Bernie Mac. Question, you got to add on to that. Help me out, Mike. I mean,
Yeah.
that's big, man.
That's incredible. I mean, it's unheard of that you can make it from Chicago. I mean, everyone has to go to New York eventually or Los Angeles because that's where everything is. They normally don't respect you for some reason.
Right.
If you don't, you know, if you don't leave and go to LA or New York. And Bernie had his own thing here. And Bernie was such a great talent that, you know, the mountain had to come to Muhammad.
Yes, that's big. You know, I'm taking Anise. Anise, you're on Garrard McClendon Live. Welcome to the show. What's your question or comment? Anise.
Hi, how are you?
Doing great.
I just wanted to say that my props go out to Bernie Mac, myself being the individual that suffers from sarcoidosis. The energy level is just so low that, I mean, I got mad love for him just to get up every day and do what he do, the energy that he put into everything that he did.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Anise. You know, Debbie, please speak to that, because those that I know with this debilitating ailment, some days it's just hard for them to get out of bed. You know, can you speak to that?
Sure. I think that is one of the most common symptoms with sarcoidosis, is that people do have a chronic fatigue, or they're just feeling badly a lot of the time. And unfortunately, that's the kind of symptom that's easily brushed aside by the medical community. So that may be the first thing that you notice when you have the disease. And certainly when you feel bad over a long period of time, that really can put a strain on not just your own life, but on your personal relationships. And I think, as that caller mentioned, that some days it is difficult to get up. And Bernie Mac as a person, certainly as an identifiable figure with the disease, makes life a little bit easier for patients, because
Yes.
I think they feel very isolated. The first time they heard the word sarcoidosis is probably when they were diagnosed, and now I think for a lot of them they can say to their families, see, this was a serious illness, and a lot of people are talking about it, and I think that's a benefit today.
That's a very good point. I'm glad you clarified that, because for those that don't understand, you know, they may think the person, you know, it may have symptoms that will go away in a few days or something of that nature, but it's a very, very serious ailment. You know, when it comes to Bernie Mac, I was hoping that he would get the rest and rehabilitate. You know, it did not happen, but his family is definitely in our prayers. Stay with us on Garrard McClendon Live. We'll be back shortly. You can always hit my blog at www.cltv.com/. Wow, it brings back memories. I'm telling you, you know, a happy day for the great music and comedy that was created, but a sad day for the two gentlemen that had to leave us this weekend. You know, I want to read this pertaining to Isaac Hayes just quickly. It talks about how he was a new traditionalist. He broke the style of songs being 3 minutes or less. He took it to the next level. He prefaced songs with raps, and Isaac Hayes was one who blended orchestration to the popular song. And so, hey, we want to thank Isaac Hayes for his many contributions. I want to go to Suzanne. Suzanne, thank you for calling Garrard McClendon Live. What's your question or comment?
I want to know if you can have sarcoidosis of the heart, and if this is the same disease that Darian Chapman died of.
Thank you so much. Debbie.
Sarcoidosis can affect any organ in the body, and yes, Darian Chapman was a figure in local media here who passed away of undiagnosed cardiac sarcoidosis, and I think that's something important to keep in mind, that sarcoidosis can be life-threatening, especially if you don't know you have it. So as patients who are calling in who've already been diagnosed, I think going to our website, learning as much as you can about the symptoms that are out there, and taking that information and knowledge back to your doctors and asking good questions, it's probably the best advice that we can give to patients.
Yes, Debbie, closing thoughts, and then I'm going to go to Mike. Closing thoughts, Debbie.
Again, I think for any of us with a chronic illness, learning as much as you can about the disease, that's really the best advice I can give to anybody. And certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to the family of Bernie Mac. Yes. He'll be missed.
Debbie, thank you. Mike, the legacy of Bernie Mac, man. Talk to us about comedy and the legacy that comedians give. Talk to us.
Well, I think, you know, Bernie Mac was, I would put him in a category of a Richard Pryor or a Dick Gregory. People are going to be following Bernie Mac and studying them, comedians. They're going to be studying him forever. I mean, he's a template of how to do it the right way, to be diligent, to be funny, to be creative, and also at the same time to not let fame go to your head and be a good guy. And Bernie Mac was a great guy.
You know, Mike, where can we catch you, man, in the Chicago area?
Well, this week, Wednesday through Friday, I'll be at Zany's in St. Charles, and Saturday I'll be at Zany's in Vernon Hills, and next week, I think it's the 19th through the 24th, I'll be at Zany's on Wells downtown.
Debbie, Mike, thanks for being on Garrard McClendon Live. We appreciate you. I want to read a few blog comments. I'm looking at Jill's blog. She says, we are all fans of the Bernie Mac show. My husband and I especially enjoyed the humor related to family. B says, I'm probably telling my age, but I enjoy Isaac Hayes' appearances on South Park. I'm reading Alan R.C.'s comment that says he will be missed. Also, the Mac Man and Isaac Hayes will be greatly missed, not just for the things on camera, but for the things they've done for community. That's Lee 3. And then Jean I says, my daughter called me today and said Bernie Mac is like losing a family member. I agree. Wow. Thank you for watching GML, and thanks to my guests, Debbie DeRay and Mike Alexander. Our thoughts are with the McCullough and Hayes families after the show. Post your comments on Bernie Mac and Isaac Hayes at cltv.com/GML. It's been great, Chicago. Be encouraged. Keep your head up, and good night.
Axe or ask? Donda's rules suit shoes.